Hi, everyone. I'm David Begnaud at the CBS News Broadcast Center in New York. Thanks for joining us. President Trump is defending his actions after reportedly taking measures to conceal communications that he had with the Kremlin. The Washington Post is reporting that Mr. Trump has gone to extraordinary lengths to hide details of his conversations with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. The report cites U.S. officials, adding there is no detailed record of the president's face-to-face interactions with Mr. Putin at 5 locations over the past 2 years. Now, the president was asked about this directly last night. He was on Fox News. Did he take any particular steps to conceal anything? This is what he said.
I'm not keeping anything under wraps. I couldn't care less. I have a one-on-one meeting with Putin like I do with every other leader. I have many one-on-one. Nobody ever says anything about it. But with Putin, they say, oh, what did they talk about? We talked about very positive things. But I meet with Putin, and they make a big deal. Anybody could have listened to that meeting. That meeting is open for grabs.
David Nakamura is a White House reporter for the Washington Post. He joins us now. David, thank you. How does the Washington Post report relate to the Russia investigation as you see it?
Well, look, I mean, this has been a long investigation about whether the president, through his campaign, had direct ties to folks in Moscow who had an interest in meddling in the U.S. elections, and in which the intelligence community of the United States believes was interested in having Donald Trump become president, potentially getting favorable policies. So this is another data point now that raises more suspicions, and is, I'm sure, open to Robert Mueller and others who are continuing to investigate this. Is almost certainly going to be part of their report and investigation. And, the president said, look, I have a lot of one-on-one meetings, but not always with authoritarian leaders of countries that are essentially, enemies or rivals of the United States. And so typically you'd want some sort of readout within the U.S. government to make sure all parts of the government, the National Security Council, State Department, Treasury, know exactly what Putin is saying and asking for, as well as trying to make sure that the president is staying on the talking points that has been developed by the U.S. government and its experts. In this case, it's not happening, and the president can deny it all he wants, that there's no big secret here. But until we see any kind of further readout of those meetings, it's not clear what was said or what was promised.
So, David, it's not surprising he went on Fox News to say he's not keeping anything under wraps. It is a little surprising he hasn't tweeted about it. I mean, this is a hell of a report, okay? And usually when there are bombshells of this magnitude, he's quick to hit the Twitter.
We just hit noon here in Washington, of course. So there's still time today. It could be that his advisors are saying, do not start tweeting about it, because that tends to become part of the public record. I mean, it is part of the public record and becomes potentially open to more analysis from the folks who are investigating these ongoing ties. And so there's no question the president feels cornered. He's lashing out at all sorts of folks. The question too here, though, is you're in the middle of a government shutdown. The president has talked about a crisis at the border and floated a national emergency. How much is one thing playing to another? In other words, the president's political problems possibly, going into this other avenue of how he reacts, on the shutdown and other avenues policy-wise to distract or sort of take attention or drive the conversation a different way. That's a troubling thought.
All right, so let's talk shutdown. The president is also defending his actions regarding the partial government shutdown. I want to ask you about your latest reporting. Who is the key surrogate that the president is enlisting for his border wall fight? He's always got Lindsey Graham.
He's already got Lindsey Graham. It's interesting. The president is playing, directly to his base here, and I think that's really what he's trying to, message toward. And so, there's different audiences, right? You have Congress, you have Democrats. The key people to try to convince to compromise and give some ground are Democrats. And Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer have shown no willingness to entertain any money for a border wall. The president was so frustrated that he walked out of a meeting in the Situation Room with those Democratic leaders just the other day and tweeted it was a waste of time. So then that raises, will the president move forward unilaterally through an national emergency? Republicans, moderate Republicans, are concerned about that, saying that usurps Congress's power, the same thing we accuse President Obama of doing on various issues, including on immigration. And so they don't necessarily agree with that. The White House is holding off now. The president is appealing to, obviously, conservatives, not only in Congress, but on talk radio, to make that case. And I wrote a story that he's also appealing to Border Patrol agents. He had some at the White House. He went also on a tour of the border of Texas and had Border Patrol agents standing right by him as he said, everybody knows we need a wall. So he's really trying to get the message out through the folks on the ground. Although it's true that, in the past, the Border Patrol has asked for other things, not necessarily a wall.
But who are the key surrogates? I mean, you've got Lindsey Graham doing his business, but are there other people? I mean, he likes to use folks to help kind of pump up the public, right? So is there somebody other than Graham?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Mark Meadows in the House is a solid, staunch conservative ally. They are making that case. They are making it to the conservative world to stay strong here. And the president has, a number of, obviously, folks, whether it's in Congress or his own staff, talking to members to try to get his points across. But like I said, there does not seem to be any sense that there's a broader, groundswell that is moving to the president's side here. He's got his longtime stalwarts in the conservative wing of the party,
right,
in the House especially, making that case, but you don't see others coming aboard.
That's fair. All right, it's the longest shutdown so far. It's a partial shutdown, as they call it. In fact, there's a report out today that says most Americans see Republicans more to blame, the president more to blame than Democrats. At this point, look, I mean, who wins this, David?
Who wins this depends on what winning really means, and that's what we don't really know from the president's point of view. Is he really just trying to solidify that base that he continues to message to? A lot of presidents come and try to sort of grow their support, right? But through at least their rhetoric, if their policies. The president shows no interest in that. He's been trying to hold the line with his conservative base. How do you win that? Is winning getting the wall? Is winning declaring a national emergency, letting that go to the courts, and saying you fought as hard as you could? It's not clear. The polls do show that most of the country, the majority of the country, holds president accountable for this shutdown much more than they do Democrats. Also true, though, Washington Post has a new poll out today saying that more Republicans support the idea of a border wall than they did a year ago, that it spiked 16% among the Republican Party, not just the conservatives, but 87% of Republicans now say they support a wall. 70% say strongly support. The president is viewing that as he is winning.
Interesting. So the confirmation hearing for the president's attorney general pick it begins this week. Republicans are insisting that William Barr will not hinder the Russia probe. What needs to happen for Democrats to favor him?
Right, and it might not matter for his confirmation in that he only needs the 50 votes, but it seems like the Democrats are saying that they got some assurances in private from him, in private conversations, that he would not interfere with this ongoing investigation. There's reports that investigation by Mueller could wrap up by February. There's been reports in the past that it was nearly completed, so we don't know for sure. But I think they're going to try to get on the record that same kind of solid promise that he will not interfere and stop the investigation. But there's more too. Some are saying, hey, we want a public assurance that he will recuse himself. Rod Rosenstein, who's been overseeing this, is probably going to leave. That has alarmed some Democrats if and when William Barr takes over. And they also may want him to promise that the full report will go to Congress as well as potentially the public. And the president's lawyers, they've staffed up with many more lawyers of the president's personal legal team, the White House team, and they're making the case now that they're going to try to get much of the report maybe redacted, based on executive privilege, that the president's private conversations with his aides should not be made public. So that's going to be also part of the battle. You probably will see that issue raised at this hearing.
So the president's going to my beloved Louisiana, going to New Orleans on Monday. He's attending the American Farm Bureau Federation's convention. I find it interesting, given the fact that some farmers have been pretty vocal, saying, listen, those tariffs are hurting us. What do you think's the reasoning behind going south?
Yeah, I think he wants to go and make his case directly to them that his approach to China and this battle on tariffs is ultimately a winner. They passed some emergency aid for farmers that will help them get through this time. But certainly there's been concern among some of the farming community that these tariffs are harmful to them. And I think the president is going to appeal directly. I think he'll also probably make an appeal about this shutdown fight and the border wall. And he'll be able to have a chance to sort of give a message directly to folks who had supported him. And it's interesting. The president has canceled some other events. He didn't go on vacation. He has canceled a trip to an economic summit in Switzerland already that was scheduled for later in the month, saying the shutdown, I can't leave Washington. But he may well. We have not heard that he's canceling this, so he may well go because he sees it as that important.
As a base, sort of, to talk to. Look, let's talk Syria real quick. The U.S. military announced this weekend it is starting to withdraw equipment from Syria. Do you have a time frame on when we could expect troops to start coming home?
We really don't know. I mean, of course, the president said he was wanted them back right away. There was this idea it would happen within 120 days. That was until his national security team got wind of this, which seemed to be maybe through the president's own tweets and statements rather than any kind of meetings ahead of time, which is, of course, troubling. Secretary of State Pompeo and National Security Advisor John Bolton, I think, had plans to stay in Syria longer with a strategy not just against the ISIS, but also to sort of help deal with this ongoing civil war and as a counter to what Iran is trying to do. And so they're concerned. They're trying to slow this down. I think folks in the Pentagon also believe you need to do this responsibly. But the president keeps saying that he wants to do this, and so it seems like the military is starting to make the moves that they're going to comply with the president's orders.
But to be fair, David, lastly, to be fair, the president appears to be listening, right?
He does. He's gone back and forth, and this happens with this president. It's a bit troubling, but he does seem to have understood. I mean, James Mattis, the defense secretary, resigned essentially because he said he went to Trump, and Trump wasn't listening, weeks ago. So but now I think there is a sense that the president understands you have to do this responsibly if you're going to draw down. Whether they'll leave any kind of others like intelligence presence in Syria to help coordinate sort of the strategy against the Islamic State. We'll see, but it does seem like the president has it's not clear exactly how quickly he wants to see this done, but it does seem like he's trying to send a message to the folks who elected him that I believe we've made a lot of progress against the Islamic State. We don't necessarily need to be in Syria for other reasons, even though his cabinet seems to think otherwise.
David Nakamura, thank you.
Sure, anytime. Thanks.